John Mayer sings "It Might Be a Quarter-Life Crisis" or "Just a Stirring in My Soul" in his debut album Room for Squares. Room for Squares dropped when I was 9 years old, so I didn't listen to it then. But I did listen to it a lot a decade later, when I was at college in Lawrence, Kansas. I remember distinctly feeling like a nobody then, which I kinda was. Perhaps it's just me, but my identity felt all hypothetical. Like, at 18, you can list your interests and proclivities, but not too many accomplishments or stories. And stories are everything in life. We see ourselves and those around us by the narratives we recite in our mind. Almost a decade later, at 25, my quarter-life caption would not be crisis. At most, it would be mustache. But mais c'est toi qui tu crées. It is you who creates yourself. And I want to be someone who travels. So we went to Paris. Where are we?
Newark. Airport.
It is 9:15.
I just finished eating.
Where are we going?
Paris. Paris.
You're excited?
Yeah.
We spend most of our time crossing between Pont Neuf and walking Rue de Bussy. I'll just say this now, staying in France, it's hard to get over the sense of deliberate aesthetic that is unequivocally non-American. In the afternoon, we decide to get lunch, but not before briefly stopping in Shakespeare & Co. It's wiping a child's sweaty handprint off the cover of Oscar Wilde's Salomé that I'm reminded how many libraries are filled with the droning voices of authors noting the differences between Europe and America. Apparently, every man or woman has felt the greedy need to pen their observations at some point. But to me, what they miss most of all while I'm in Paris is how the two sides of the Atlantic value utility. Then again, perhaps it's better not to philosophize while sneaking onto hotel rooftops for a better view. We stop and get crepes in Saint-Michel. The way the man makes them is an art. French crepes are like burgers in America, ubiquitous and done best in their homeland. This one is also delicious. But this is an example of what I mean, crepes. You may order them with every exotic food you can imagine, except for the utility American protein, red meat. Here, they don't believe in drip coffee, and the streets are rarely at right angles or numbered. They use 2 faucet handles, while Americans prefer 1. Afterward, we take the metro to Montmartre. And near Chateau Rouge, I stop at a cafe and ask for a cafe americano. They apologize for the wait. I'm told it's the first time they've made one. All these differences are trivial, but they are the fingerprints to why Paris is magical and the US is...
They're ripping us left and right. Just take them to McDonald's and go back to the negotiating table.
After a few days, we decide to take a train to London and get a hotel close to where the BBC is headquartered, just north of Regent Street. Delaney tells me London reminds her of a bigger, better Brooklyn. To me, London reminds me of a New York City without geometry. But I find it hard to articulate occasionally to people that action can just be action. There need not be a corollary. I want to be someone who goes to London, so I go to London. The act of doing naturally reshapes you. You don't need to think about it in the end as much as your mind wants to. I also want to be someone who goes to dinner, so we head to this Thai house in the city that serves ridiculous American drinks. And we see Trafalgar Square, and St. Paul's, and the London Bridge. Turns out, London has a lot of bridges. But for our last couple of nights, we decide to return to France. Back in Paris, we're now in the 7th arrondissement. And the Eiffel Tower lives only a few minutes from our hotel. When we walk through the Champs de Mars, I noticed the radius around the Eiffel Tower is now extremely guarded. There are security checkpoints and corrugated steel barriers that look like they're from Syria. I can tell they're afraid of terrorism, perhaps fairly reasonably so, particularly in Paris. But we have terrorism too in New York, and there are no walls. I was 9 when the Twin Towers fell. It was the same year John Mayer released his album. and instead we just chose to rebuild the entire thing taller. Perhaps it is this difference that is what it means to be, quote, American. Or whatever that heavy adjective so lightly thrown around can ever really mean. But I do love this city. Oscar Wilde said, "When good Americans die, they go to Paris." I like the cafes and the streets, the architecture, and that people smoke, as if it were still 1920, and Fitzgerald and Hemingway were debating the structure of sentences, and Picasso was still painting courageously. I also like the girl I'm here with in Paris. We arrived back in the United States on the 4th of July. Very American on the 4th of July. We go to my rooftop and watch the fireworks. It's funny, we light off rockets to celebrate the Continental Congress's victory over London with the assistance of Paris, two capitals that had just accepted us both with open arms hours ago. Indeed, 264 years ago, British soldiers were camped where I now currently live. And Thomas Jefferson was writing "We hold these truths to be self-evident" on a piece of parchment borrowed from the local tavern. Come to think of it, the United States was a nobody, its identity all hypothetical, listing its interests and proclivities, but all its stories, ça say, the ones that make it what it is today, those were still to be written. I guess, as the French say, c'est nous qui nous créons. It is we who create ourselves. And I wanted to go to Paris.